In the house, Tessa, just sign the papers and walk away. You don't need it, he does. Those were the exact words my mother said to me the morning after my father's funeral. Not, how are you holding up, or I know this is hard. Just, sign the papers and walk away. My brother needed it, I didn't. I've spent a long time trying to understand how a person gets to a place where they look at their grieving daughter and say something like that. I still don't have a clean answer. What I do have is a story, and a police report, and a restraining order, and a house that has my name on the deed. So there's that. My name is Tessa. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed pharmacist, and for most of my adult life, I believed that if I worked hard, stayed quiet, and caused no problems, my family would eventually see me, not love me more than my brother. I'm not asking for more. Just equally. Just once. My brother's name is Griffin. He's 36. He's never held a job for longer than 8 months. He has a charm that you have to experience in person to understand, the kind that makes strangers want to help him before he's finished his first sentence. My parents spent my entire childhood watching him fail upward and then quietly funding the landing, a restaurant in Austin that folded in 14 months, a real estate venture in Phoenix that took $80,000 of my father's money with it, a consulting business that, as far as anyone could tell, consisted mostly of Griffin taking meetings at expensive restaurants and expensing them to my father's credit card. Every time, my father sighed and said, he'll find his footing. Every time, my mother said nothing and moved money. I said nothing too. I had my own footing. I'd gotten through pharmacy school on a combination of scholarships, loans, and weekend shifts at a CVS that left me too tired to be bitter. I had a modest apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I had a fiancé named Wesley, steady, kind, the kind of man who would drive 40 minutes to bring you soup when you were sick and never once mention it again. I had a life that was small but mine, and I held on to it carefully. My father's name was Roy. He was a retired civil engineer. He loved bad puns and good coffee and the Cleveland Browns with a loyalty that, in my more cynical moments, I thought he should have reserved for his daughter instead. He and I weren't close in the way that some fathers and daughters are close, but he was fair. He was the only one in that family who was consistently fair. When he died, a massive stroke, March no warning. I flew home to Columbus from a conference in Chicago. My mother called me while I was still at baggage claim. Your father's gone. Then, before I could say anything, Griffin is already here. Of course he was. My father's will was read 3 weeks after the funeral. I'm going to give you the short version because the long version involves a lot of estate law that I still don't fully understand, and a lawyer named Mr. Okafor who charged $400 an hour and was worth every cent. The house was a brick colonial in a suburb of Columbus. My parents had bought it in 1989 for $140,000. It was now worth, according to a recent appraisal, $610,000. Paid off. No mortgage. My father's will, written in 2019 and updated in 2021, left the house to me. He left Griffin a cash sum of $85,000, which, given Griffin's history, my father had specifically structured as a trust disbursement at $2,000 a month so Griffin couldn't blow it all at once. The remainder of the estate, savings, a small investment account, my father's car, was split equally between us. This was what my father wanted. This was what he wrote down, signed, and had witnessed. What my family wanted was something else entirely. The morning after the will reading, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where I'd done my homework for 12 years. She folded her hands, and I remember thinking she looked more composed than someone who'd buried her husband 3 weeks ago had any right to look. Griffin needs stability, she said. The house would give him that, something to anchor him. I waited. You have Wesley. You two will buy your own place eventually. You don't need this house. Dad left it to me, I said. Your father was sick the last year of his life. His judgment wasn't. He updated the will in 2021, I said. He was not sick in 2021. She looked at me with an expression I'd seen before, patient, slightly pitying, like I was a child who didn't understand how the adult world worked. It's just a house, Tessa. That phrase was the first match dropped on what would become a very large fire. Over the next 6 weeks, the pressure was constant. My mother called me every other day. Sometimes she was gentle. I just want the family to be okay. And sometimes she was harder. You're being selfish, and your father would be disappointed. Griffin called too, less often, but when he did, he was charming in that particular way of his, like we were in on a joke together. Like I should understand that of course he needed the house, of course it made more sense for him to have it. Wouldn't I want to help my brother? I said the same thing every time. Dad left it to me. I'm not signing anything. Wesley watched all of this with the kind of quiet that meant he was holding back more than he was saying. He had his own history with a difficult family. He understood something that I was still learning, that people who have spent a lifetime getting what they want do not stop wanting it just because someone says no. What I didn't anticipate was what they would do about it. My mother asked me to come to the house in late May. She said she needed help sorting through my father's belongings, clothes, books, the things in his office. She said she didn't want to do it alone. She said it with a tremble in her voice that I now know was completely manufactured, but at the time I believed it because it was my mother and she had just lost her husband, and some part of me will apparently always be 12 years old and hoping. I drove out on a Saturday morning. Wesley offered to come. I told him I was fine. That was my mistake, and I knew it the second I walked through the front door. Griffin was there. He wasn't supposed to be there, or at least my mother had given me no indication that he would be. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a manila folder in front of him and a pen laid neatly beside it. My mother was standing by the counter. There was a third person there too, a man I didn't recognize, heavy-set, wearing a button-down shirt that was slightly too small. He introduced himself with a first name only. He didn't explain why he was in my dead father's kitchen. "We just need you to sign a quitclaim deed," Griffin said. "It releases your interest in the property. It's not a big deal." I looked at the folder. I looked at Griffin. I looked at my mother. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "We've had this conversation." What happened next happened faster than I can fully account for even now. My mother moved toward me from my left. I thought she was going to grab my arm, pull me aside, make another pitch. Instead, she stepped past me and got between me and the door. Griffin stood up from the table. The man I didn't recognize, who I later learned my mother had hired to serve as some kind of witness, which tells you how planned this was, stepped back toward the wall. Griffin picked up the folder and held it out to me. "Just sign it, Tessa." "No." "You're being ridiculous. You don't even want to live here." "It doesn't matter what I want to do with it. Dad left it to me." "I'm not signing." My mother's voice had changed, not trembling anymore. Flat and hard in a way I hadn't heard before. "You sign that, or I will make your life very difficult." "How?" I asked. I genuinely wanted to know. "Griffin found something," she said. "Some financial irregularities in the estate filings. We can make it look like you took money. We can contest the will on grounds of undue influence, that you manipulated your father in his last years. We have people who will testify to that." The room was very quiet. "You're describing fraud," I said. "I'm describing what will happen if you don't sign." I looked at my brother. I was waiting for him to look away, to show some discomfort, some trace of the person I'd grown up with. He met my eyes without flinching. "Just sign it," he said. "It doesn't have to be this hard." I picked up my keys from the counter where I'd set them. "I'm leaving," I said. "Don't call me." I got to the front door. I had my hand on the knob. My mother said, "Tessa, don't embarrass yourself." I walked out. I sat in my car in the driveway for 45 seconds. I counted, I don't know why, and then I called Wesley. He picked up on the first ring. "I need you to listen to me," I said. "And then I need you to not panic. I want to stop here for a moment and tell you about something called documentation, because it's the thing that ultimately saved me, and I didn't know nearly enough about it before all of this happened. I am a pharmacist. I work in a world of records and verification. I should have understood instinctively that you document everything, that you write down dates and times and exact words, that you keep copies of everything sent to you and confirmation of everything you send. But when it's your family, you don't think that way. You think, these are people who love me. You think, this will resolve itself. You think, I don't need a paper trail with my own mother. By the time I sat down with Mr. Okafor, my attorney, whom Wesley had found through a colleague, whom I called from the driveway before I'd even started the car, I had almost nothing in writing. A few text messages. That was all. Mr. Okafor said, start documenting everything immediately. Every call, every message, every interaction. Date, time, content, witnesses. From this moment forward. I did. The will contest was filed 6 weeks later. It alleged, as my mother had promised, that I had exercised undue influence over my father in the last 2 years of his life. The filing described me as having isolated my father from his family, which was interesting, given that I lived 2 hours away and had seen my father maybe 8 times a year. It claimed I had inserted myself into his financial planning. It named 2 witnesses, a neighbor I barely knew, and a woman who had been my mother's friend for 30 years. Mr. Okafor read through it and said, this is weak, but it will cost you time and money to fight it, which may be the actual point. The same week the contest was filed, my mother escalated. I received a letter, actual physical letter, certified mail, from a man presenting himself as a private attorney for the Griffin Family Trust. The letter stated that the family intended to pursue claims against me for financial misconduct related to the estate, that these claims would be filed with the county probate court, and that I should expect additional legal action unless I agreed to deed the property to Griffin within 30 days. I photographed the letter, emailed it to Mr. Okafor, and wrote down the date and time I received it. My phone was ringing constantly. I stopped answering calls from my mother. I stopped answering calls from Griffin. I had my aunt, my father's sister, a woman named Donna who had 0 patience for drama and who had watched my mother for 30 years with her arms folded, relay a single message. I will not be signing anything. Any further communication should go through my attorney. The calls didn't stop. They switched to texting. You're tearing this family apart. Your father would be ashamed of you. Griffin has nowhere to go. Do you understand that? He has nowhere. That last one sat with me for a while, not because it was true. Griffin had an apartment in Atlanta that my mother was quietly paying for, but because I recognized the tactic. The same one she'd been using my entire life. Make it about Griffin's need. Make Griffin's need so large that your own disappears. I took a screenshot of every message. I sent them to Mr. Okafor. What I'm about to tell you is the part of the story that I almost didn't include because even now it makes me feel stupid. Not because I couldn't have seen it coming. I maybe should have, but because of how ordinary it looked. 7 weeks into the legal fight, my mother called Wesley. Not me. Wesley. She got his number from somewhere. I still don't know how. And she called him while I was at work on a Tuesday afternoon. She told him that I was not the person he thought I was. She told him that I had stolen money from my father's estate. She told him that the legal trouble I was in was serious and that he should think carefully about whether he wanted to be attached to someone facing fraud allegations. Then she told him that the kindest thing he could do for both of us was to encourage me to sign the deed and end this, and that if he did, she would be grateful. Wesley listened to all of it. He said almost nothing. When I got home that evening, he was sitting at the kitchen table and he said, "Your mother called me today." I sat down. He told me everything she'd said in order without editorializing. Then he said, "I want you to know that I believe you, not her. And I want you to know that I'm going to need you to not keep things from me anymore." That last part landed somewhere deep because he was right. I had been managing this the same way I'd managed everything my whole life. Quietly. Alone. Not wanting to burden anyone. I had been protecting him from the full weight of it, which meant I had been doing it by myself. "Okay," I said. "No more managing." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Also," he said, "I recorded the call." I stared at him. "Ohio is a one-party consent state," he said. I looked it up before I answered. I want to say the recording was the thing that ended it, but the truth is more complicated than that. What the recording did was give Mr. Okafor something concrete to work with. My mother had said on tape that I was facing fraud allegations. There were no fraud allegations. The letter from Griffin's attorney had implied there might be future claims, but nothing had been filed. Making that statement to a third party about a specific named individual is called defamation, potentially slander. Mr. Okafor drafted a letter. At the same time, Mr. Okafor had been working through the will contest itself, and in the process of responding to the undue influence allegations, he'd obtained phone records showing how frequently my mother and Griffin had communicated with my father's financial advisor in the months before the will was updated, including a meeting that my father had not been present for, in which Griffin and my mother had discussed whether the trust structure could be altered to benefit Griffin more directly. That meeting had nothing to do with me, but it did have something to do with my father's clearly stated wishes and with whether someone had tried to alter them and with who was actually influencing whom. Mr. Okafor sent all of this to the opposing attorney in a single letter that I read 3 times and still find beautiful. The will contest was dropped 9 days later. The thing about the call stopping is that it's not peaceful at first. It's just quiet in a way that feels like waiting. I kept checking my phone. I kept expecting another certified letter, another escalation, another angle I hadn't anticipated. I'd been in fight mode for 4 months. My body didn't know how to stop. Wesley and I took a long weekend in Nashville, partly because we both needed to go somewhere that wasn't Columbus, partly because I had never in my adult life taken a trip without having a reason beyond I need to go somewhere. We drove, we ate at places with checkered tablecloths, we walked along the river at night, and I realized that I had stopped looking over my shoulder somewhere around the Tennessee state line. "Do you think they'll try again?" I asked him. "I think they know they can't win," he said. "That's not the same as stopping." "No," he said, "but it's enough for now." My Aunt Donna calls me every couple of weeks. She was the only one on that side of the family who treated the whole situation the way it deserved to be treated. She was furious, frankly, and she said so in a long handwritten letter to my mother that I will never see, but that Donna once described to me as thorough. She tells me my mother has moved to be closer to Griffin in Atlanta. She tells me Griffin's newest venture is some kind of app. She tells me this with a tone that communicates exactly what she thinks of it. I don't call my mother. I don't call Griffin. I sent my mother a card on her birthday, a plain one, not a sentimental one, because I am 31 years old and I have not yet figured out how to fully stop trying, and maybe I never will. She didn't respond. The house is rented now, a family with 2 kids and a dog named apparently Spaghetti. They put a wind spinner in the backyard garden, the kind my father would have found tacky and secretly enjoyed. The rent covers the property taxes and then some. Wesley and I have talked about what to do with it long term. Sell it, keep renting it, maybe eventually move into it ourselves. We haven't decided. What I do know is that it's mine, not because I fought for it, though I did, but because my father wanted me to have it and wrote that down and signed his name, and I refused to let anyone take that from him. Mr. Okafor sent me a handwritten note when the case closed. It said, "Your father chose well." I put it on the refrigerator and I have not taken it down. People ask me sometimes what I would tell someone who's going through something like this. A family member contesting a will, relatives using legal threats as leverage, parents who decided that one child's need permanently outweighs another's. And I never have a clean answer because I don't think there is one, but I'll say the things I actually learned. Document everything from the first moment something feels wrong, not later, not when it escalates. From the first moment, write down dates and times, keep every message. If someone calls you and says something threatening, hang up and write down exactly what they said, word for word, immediately. Get an attorney who specializes in estate law before you need one. The conversation costs much less than the crisis. Tell your partner, whatever you're managing alone, because you think it protects them. Tell them, you cannot do this alone and you shouldn't have to. And maybe the last thing, the one I think about most, there is a version of yourself that will want to sign the papers just to make it stop, just to end the calls and the letters and the weight of it. I understand that impulse completely. I felt it at 2 a.m. more times than I can count. Don't sign, not unless you want to, not because someone else needs you to. Your name on that document means something. Your father's wishes mean something. You mean something. The quiet on the other side of all of it is real. It took me a while to trust that it would stay, but it did. It still does. I still think about that kitchen table sometimes. The folder. The pen laid neatly beside it like someone had rehearsed the whole thing. What strikes me now isn't the anger. I've mostly worked through the anger. It's how long the setup took. My mother didn't decide to do that to me the week my father died. That plan had roots going back years, maybe decades, built on a single assumption she had never once questioned, that my needs would give way, that I would fold the way I always had, because folding was what I did. She wasn't entirely wrong about my history. I had been folding my whole life, quietly, politely, telling myself it was the right thing to do. That's what I keep coming back to when I think about the person I was walking into that house versus the person who walked out of it. The difference wasn't that I suddenly got angrier or harder. It was that I finally understood something about what it actually means to do the right thing, and that it sometimes looks, from the outside, like stubbornness. My father was a fair man. He wasn't perfect, but he was fair, and he made a decision about what he wanted to happen to something he'd spent his life building. Honoring that wasn't about the money. It wasn't even really about the house. It was about whether his final wishes meant anything at all, or whether they could just be erased because Griffin needed something, and I was the easier target. That's the part I couldn't let go of. Not for me, for him. I think a lot about what it took to get through those months. The attorney fees were real. The stress was real. The 2 a.m. moments when I genuinely considered signing just to make it stop. Those were real too. What kept me going wasn't courage in any grand sense. It was smaller than that. It was Wesley sitting across the table saying I recorded it. It was Mr. Okafor reading a document and knowing exactly what it meant. It was my Aunt Donna who had watched this family for 30 years and refused to pretend it was normal. None of those people could have helped me if I hadn't finally let them in. That's the thing I'd do differently if I could go back. I'd stop trying to manage it alone. I'd tell Wesley sooner. I'd call Mr. Okafor the day of the will reading, not 6 weeks later. The intelligence to see what was happening was there. What I was missing was the willingness to use it, to actually build something instead of just surviving. And I think about Griffin sometimes. Not with softness I don't feel, but with something closer to clarity. He spent 36 years being handed things and told he deserved them. My mother thought she was helping him. What she actually did was make it impossible for him to build anything real, because he never had to. Every time someone clears the path too completely, they take something from the person walking it. I don't know how that story ends for him. I know how mine ends. A house with a family in it and a wind spinner in the backyard and a note on my refrigerator that I haven't taken down. That note is enough.